Hey, what's up guys, this is Liam or Weagle on your Overwatch, back with a new video. Today, we're going to talk about the stats that everyone throws around, the stats that are lying to you, and the ones that people use to defend themselves for not making a swap in matchmaking. The most important thing I need to get out there first though is that remember, context always matters, and I will try to explain the context for everything that I say in this video. Now, one of our first popular videos on this channel just after we started over a year ago was the Gold Medal Fallacy. This sparked a lot of conversation in the community about how bad is trash damage. If you have gold damage but you're losing the game, maybe that damage isn't being output in the right place. Well, today we're going to debunk this again, but further, and with a lot of other stats that people throw around that also don't really make all that much sense given the wrong context. Now we're going to start with gold damage, and I'm going to use tanks as the main example because getting gold or silver damage on tanks can mean one of two things. It could mean that maybe your DPS aren't doing their job, but oftentimes what it means is that you may be over-initiating as Winston, for example, at a horrible choke point, and your team can't get through to do that damage themselves. Your job as a tank is to help your team initiate, whether it be with a shield, whether it's defense matrix, or diving in with them. But if you're playing Winston without a Lucio and you've got ground-based DPS, there's no way that then DPS players can take gold damage off of the Winston since he's the only one that can get past a choke. But this also goes a lot further than that. Regardless of what the tank is doing, sometimes your job as a DPS might be just eliminating a threat. Maybe their Tracer's the problem and you need to kill her as Mccree or Soldier, whoever you're playing. Well, she's got a tiny hitbox. Your 150 damage on her may be the win. And sometimes people don't realize that and they look at these stats and they could see you as not doing a lot. Well, maybe you've just carried the game by killing that thing with only 150 HP instead of shooting Ryan's fat body, and then he gets healed every time and charges the enemy ultimates. I think gold damage is just about the most useless stat because the only damage that really matters is impact damage, and that's very hard to define in a medal. Even damage to heroes, even though it's better than when it's included with barriers as well, still doesn't really tell the full story, because if you're shooting things and nothing's dying, that's still trash damage. Now the next stat is actually quite controversial because it's very hard to understand the context and it's also quite difficult for me to explain, but I'm gonna have a go at it. And this is damage blocked. I've seen many Ryans defending their plays in the past saying that they've blocked 50,000 damage for an entire game, which is an incredible amount of damage blocked, and you would think that that's glorious, right? Well, if you actually look at this for what it is, what it probably means is your Ryan never had a shield because when you were regrouping, his shield was up at the choke, and when you needed to fight, that shield was gone. This is also without mentioning the other value that Ryan can have. If he's being sped through a choke and pocketed, he can swing for the rest of days and just smack things in the face and get great elims. He is scary in a very close quarters swing fight. Also, his fire strike is very good if you can get used to it, and his crowd control ultimate is one of the best in the game. Reinhardt has all of this value past just to the value of his shield, and if you have way more than like 20,000 damage blocked, the chances are you never had your shield when you needed it and you wasn't utilizing the rest of his kit in the right way. If you're in a game where you're at the choke with your team with a shield and you can't get anywhere, Reinhardt just isn't the pick. Trash damage blocked is really important to try and avoid, and trying to get that balance again is where you have to apply that context. Of course you should be blocking damage with Reinhardt, but where does that threshold end? If you played a 10-minute game with 50,000 damage blocked, that's not good. But if you've played a half hour's 2 CP and it's 25,000, then maybe you're doing something more along the correct lines. Just be careful, make sure you've always got your shield whenever you're about to have an engagement. Next up is even more controversial than the last, and that is win rate. Win rate is a very difficult thing to explain in Overwatch for many different reasons. First of all, win rate is actually not what determines exactly how you rank up in Overwatch. That is actually your stats and what the system thinks your stats you are getting are good enough to gain or lose a certain amount of skill rating. Which is very interesting having this discussion saying how these stats don't matter to the win of Overwatch. However, they do matter to ranking up. Win rate does not necessarily mean how much you rank up, because there's plenty of 30 to 40% win rates out there that are in the highest levels of play that will never swap off of their heroes. This is just the one reason why win rate doesn't necessarily mean something, but usually win rate is used to justify a pick because they have a high win rate on that hero. This happens a lot with Symmetra and some other heroes too that will usually have a 60 to 70% win rate. Well, the reason that actually happens isn't that Sim has a high win rate, is because generally people actually swap off of her when she's not working. When she is work, you roll, you get 100% win, and it's all good and dandy. However, because the stats are calculated in 10-minute sections, if you swap off of Sim when you get rolled, that will only count towards a minute or two of her 10 minutes. That means that when you roll again, you get a much better majority vote in the win rate department, and it boosts the win rate of that hero. So win rate does not necessarily mean that the person playing that hero is good with them or technically has a good win rate on that hero, because if they swap off and then play a decent hero and win out the game, that initial hero will also get boosted for that stat. So I know that's a little bit confusing, but that's also another thing that happens with win rate. I think one of the best examples of this as well was also something that happened at the pro play. Some casters were talking about how good a certain pro was on Doomfist, and even though that pro was amazing, because that team had played against lower tier teams and the Doomfist had such good stats on win rate, it was a little bit inflated for when they played a team of a similar caliber and the Doomfist got shut down. So these win rates can easily get skewed as well, so you have to be careful when looking at them. Of course, if someone's winning more of their games and they only play a certain hero or two, then yes, they're probably good on them heroes. Again, applying that context is what matters. I'm going to roll this into accuracy now, because I also see that accuracy stat get thrown around, again in different contexts. Sometimes you'll see someone bragging about their accuracy, or other times maybe you'll see someone in a game saying, I've got great accuracy in this game, I don't have to swap. Which happened in a game with me the other day, where a Farah on my team had an 80% accuracy, but nothing was dying. He didn't want to swap and wasn't going to swap, so he called his accuracy stat and how good it was. He was actually playing Farah. However, you need the impact damage as explained in the first example. If you're shooting tanks with a 75% accuracy and nothing's dying, you're not the new Mccree. It means you're not attempting the hard prediction shots that can kill squishies, and that's what most important here. Now, Mccree is also a great example of this, and it kind of goes back to the gold damage example too. Mccree can keep shooting tanks and get gold damage and get a high accuracy, but if they're not dying and you have a 60% accuracy, what does that mean? People say that you should have an overall stat accuracy with Mccree of about 50%. Well, if you're only got a 25% accuracy, but you've killed their Tracer 10 times trying to shoot her, you're going to miss some shots on a Tracer, but if you keep killing her, denying the value of the flanker doing your main job as Mccree, your accuracy is going to be low. And there's no way, again, for that to be reflected in the stats as a positive thing. It just looks like you're whiffing according to the stats, when really, you could be carrying the game. The last stat to talk about is the good old elims, which I think people find more justifiable to say if you've got gold elims, that's a good thing. However, gold elims can also mean pretty much nothing. Number one, I think, is where people say, I'm playing Winston and I have gold elims on 3. Well, if you've got gold elims on 3, I would say the problem is probably not just one of your DPS players, it's probably the whole team comp coordination synergy and all of that put together. If your Zen's got gold on 2 kills, that doesn't mean that your DPS is playing bad. That means that something isn't working fundamentally as a team. It could be your initiation, no speed boost, whatever it may be. But that is no fault of one player, and because you have gold on 2, well, most of your team probably also have gold elims too. This also goes further than this though. Someone like Winston is always brawling. They are always in the fight. So a tank like Winston that dives in and is always fighting something should have gold elims. Whereas someone like Mccree or Junkrat that sat there trying to do damage or get the kills that matter, well, they might not necessarily have gold elims, but back to the accuracy example, the Mccree might have killed their Tracer 5 times, which meant your team can keep healing the things on the front line that actually get all of the elims and the damage done. It all works together in this cohesive team comp thing. That's the whole point in Overwatch. So how many elims you've got doesn't necessarily matter. Because you've got the most elims might mean that you're being healed through all the damage that you're taking, or that someone else is dealing with a threat that you don't have to deal with, so you get to have the pleasure of just wrecking things in the face. Again, a very meaningless stat, along with a lot of all of these in the wrong context. You've also got other stats like kills on the objective and time on the objective, and again, these don't really apply to anything, because if you're on the objective when you shouldn't be and you should be fighting something to then secure the objective, you're making the wrong play. But in another context, the fight might be on the objective, so that's where you should be. That applies to both the time and the kills, but there's not much more to go into on that stat. The only stat I think that doesn't really have a downside is probably gold healing, because generally you are healing things that are taking damage. So even if your team are playing bad, you're still trying to prop them up to do things. So you can't really go wrong on healing. Although if you have a Lucio and an Ana, and your Lucio's healing all the tanks, but your Ana's getting some clutch anti-nades and shooting the Pharah to heal her or to kill the enemy Pharah, then the Lucio may have more healing, and that doesn't necessarily that the Ana's having a bad game. It might just mean that Lucio's healing the tanks, because Lucio's heal actually is really powerful when you have more than a few people in it. A lot more powerful than most people realize. So guys, that's just about everything. Let us know in the comments section what you think to any of the stuff we've discussed today. Be sure to check out our Twitter, guys, where you can find new streams, new videos, funny stuff, and all that good stuff. Be sure to hit that bell icon so you guys get notified when our videos go live. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and have a great day as always. Take care and peace, people.